All right. It looks like we're live right now. What's happening, buddy? I'm back. Robert Phoenix here. It is Friday, and I'm hoping that we have a kind of a double live stream going on here. I'm gonna try to check on YouTube and see what's happening, and hopefully YouTube live on your channel, Friday FARcast. There it is. How about that, boys and girls? Friday FARcast. This is on, I think it's on the, let's see, let me just go in there. Where is it? It's on the, what channel is this on? It's on the 15 Minutes of Flame channel. So we have theoretically, we have a live stream happening. I'm going to check on that a little bit here and just make sure that it's continuing to happen. We got 0 thumbs up. Let me just see here. Mute that. Let me go to the website and see if we have a stream on the website, because they may not be happening simultaneously in real time. Okay, so I'm streaming live on the website, and it looks like, let me just go back to YouTube, because there could be a bit of a delay. Yep, okay. We got a double live stream happening. All right. So this will be an interesting experience and show. Now, I want to do this a bit more frequently, and so on Monday, I'm gonna probably do a Monday show where I'm streaming live here, and then I'm streaming live on the YouTube channel simultaneously. And then on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm going to stream for maybe the first 15, 20 minutes on YouTube and then cut it. And then we're going to do some simulcasts here on Fridays, so that, you know, I don't get, here's what happened. There was a rumor that I died. Okay. This is part of the reason why I'm doing this, because apparently if you're not on YouTube, you're dead. And I had more than one person last weekend ask me if I was still alive. In fact, Emily asked me if I was still alive, because apparently somebody in her chat room, her Patreon, was asking those same questions. So part of the reason why I'm doing this is because I want YouTube to validate my immortal status. But I also feel like we need to, spread the message out a little bit. You don't have to go to YouTube. You can stay right here. You could have your own Clubhouse experience on 15 Minutes of Flame, which is also today doubling as the Friday FARcast platform. But it'll be interesting to see what kind of feedback we get from the YouTube side of things. Hold on one second. I gotta get this out of there. All right. It's a little cord issue. Anyway, I'm excited to have Matt Landman come back on here. It's been a couple of years since I had Matt on. I think I had Matt on back in, God, I don't know, might have been 2017, maybe 2018. It was right around there. I think it was still in Austin when Matt was on the program, and Matt was just getting cooking with the geoengineering stuff. So he's going to come back on today, and we're going to talk about Frankenskies, Frankencities, Franken everything, and try to give people a sense as to how fast things are happening and where they're going. And really, the nuts and bolts of all this is the Smart City program, Agenda 2030, total surveillance, 24/7 surveillance. I mean, they'll even surveil your shit. Okay, I'm not kidding you. They will have sensors in your toilets, and if you eat food, which you probably already are, that has nanoparticles in it. And somewhere in those nanoparticles is an actual barcode of the food you ate. They'll be able to track your food and what you ate all the way through the elimination process. And you think this is nuts. It's not. This is how deep these control mechanisms are that they have planned and in store for us. Because if you color outside the lines, you will be given a demerit, and you will lose, your carbon credit coins, and you won't be able to meet your rent, or you won't be able to buy your Soylent Green, or whatever privilege that they have in store for people who are playing along with the game and want to be nice. What do we have here? Hold on. Hold on. Are you calling me? Yeah, I'm just about ready to do my show. I'll call you back in a bit. Bye. Okay. All right. So let me check in with YouTube. Let's see what we got going on over there. This should be interesting. Now, ideally, I'd love to have a mod over on YouTube as well. Let's see, we got 12 thumbs up. JMP Love, Ian Barber. Okay, so what I don't want to do is I don't want to have like two places where people can chat. I may disable chat on YouTube, by the way. We'll see how it goes. Because this is one of the reasons why I stopped using Boxcast, because I was doing these simulcasts, and we had one group over here in one area and one group over here in another area. So today I'm going to let it go. But I think next week when we do this, or on Monday, I will not have any chat on YouTube. So if you want to be in chat, you got to come over to the 15 Minutes of Flame site, or else there's no reason for me to pay for Boxcast. And then I'm back in the YouTube world. And then, of course, my fate is hanging by a thread, and they can just say, you're caputo and done. So we can do this today, but moving forward, there will be no chat on YouTube. Chat will be disabled. So you can watch it, you can get into it, it'll be a record there, but it's not going to, moving forward, I don't want to sound like a freaking dictator, but I just don't want to have people in two different places. That was a problem before. Okay, so we'll let it roll for today, and Matt will be joining us in about 2 minutes. I was on Clyde Lewis's show last night, and Clyde, I got a phone call, I think it was about less than an hour before the show, and Ron Patton, who's Clyde's producer, reached out, and apparently they had a cancellation with a guest. And I was just on Clyde, so Clyde does not necessarily like to have guests on very frequently. Like, he likes to wait about 3 or 4 months, but because they had a hole in the programming last night, I got off the bench and I was on with Clyde for about an hour, and we talked about the eclipse. And I love Clyde. I mean, the guy, you can just tell. I mean, he's really been steeped in a lot of Christian theology. He even talks about it. He was a dispensationalist, right? That's how he was raised, and a lot of that seeps through his writing and his, how would I phrase it, like his spiritual zeitgeist. And I mean, Clyde reminds me of somebody who he's a preacher, but he's like a dark preacher, and he's born right. I think he's born right at the edge of Pisces. I think he's like the final degree of Pisces, if I'm not mistaken. And his birthday this year is on 2/22. That's Clyde is born 2/22, right? And this year it's 2/22/22, which is really a very pivotal date in time. And maybe I'll talk about that on the Sunday night show. But one of the things that I talked about last night with Clyde, and it has some relevance, is that the eclipse was in exact opposition with Joe Biden's sun. Okay, this is really kind of important, because what's going to happen here is that Joe Biden was just admitted today into surgery for a colonoscopy. And it may seem like a formality, but Kamala Harris right now is technically president of the United States. I don't think Joe Biden will last 6 months based on the eclipse, which happened exactly opposite his son. He's on his way out. And today is kind of it's either a test trial or a test run, or they're actually going to hand over the keys, and there may be complications with Biden, who is going in for something on an eclipse. All right. It's like Matt is here. So let's bring Matt in and welcome him back to the Friday FARcast. Let's see. Get them all teed up here. Hey, Matt.
Hi, I don't have the background you do.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm in the new office.
Well, my background fluctuates on a daily basis. So today I wanted to kind of bring in some older alternative energy and imagery here, so we could offset some of the surreal Franken fiction that we're going to be talking about today.
Cool. I love it.
Yeah. So what's new? How's life?
Oh, wow. Life is really good, actually. I've devoted my life to being an activist, and it's finally paying off. You kind of just let go and trust God or the universe. Kind of like that game when you have like a girlfriend or whatever, or, a partnership, and they do these trust seminars or whatever, and you just shut your eyes and let go, and they catch you, right? And
right.
This trust is built. I kind of feel like it's been like that over the past the past decade, really, but the past few years, especially, just trusting it's all going to work out. And finally, it's coming together. I'm able to have an office and have this EMF protective clothing line, and I'm actually finally able to get my movie out in the world. I'm selling it for $3 through my EMF protective clothing line, and making that a means of funding further activism, but also getting the message out there through protection. So through protection, I'm bringing awareness to people, and I'm not exactly where. I mean, of course, I'm always striving to do more, but as an activist, I'm able to say that's my job and my livelihood, and I'm proud of that. So I can finally say, yeah, I'm in a lot of gratitude. Thanks for asking. How about you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks, and I'm excited to have you back on. I think it was about maybe 3 years ago when I first had you on, and you were just starting to work on the film. Weren't you in Arizona at that time?
Yes, I was in
Right.
Arizona, and
Right.
the Frankenskies came out in 2017, and then I started digging in and trying to make a sequel. I was working on a movie that was based on EMF radiation and whatnot, but that's kind of getting mixed into Frankenskies 2 Climate Chains. So I'm not sure exactly when we talked, but yeah, I was living in Sedona, and I hosted this huge conference in Tucson to stop the sun dimming experiments through Bill Gates at the time. And we were able to put that on hiatus, which was a huge success, but now it's kind of rearing its ugly head in Sweden again.
It's coming back around, isn't it?
Yeah.
So let's get the formality out of the way. Where can people find your EMF protective clothing and the documentary?
So for the clothing, the name of the clothing line is Spero, basically, Spero. It means hope in Latin and Spanish and Italian. Also means I hope in Spanish. And so the impetus or the name was created because I want to bring hope to the next generation and us as well through radiation protection. So it's Sparrow Gear is the easy way to find it. And Sparrow Gear on Instagram, SPERO gear.com. And then for the film Frankenskies, which I was able to finally get Frankenskies.com. So you can go to Frankenskies.com, and we're building a new website there. Right now, it forwards you over to FrankenskiesTheMovie.com because that was my original website. But Frankenskies.com, you can watch the film, and that links you to the Vimeo. My YouTube got pulled, but you can find Frankenskies anywhere now. I've got it in French and Spanish and multiple languages on every platform you can think of: Brighteon, BitChute, Rumble, all that kind of stuff. So it's out there, and I hope that people can give it a watch or find it at Frankenskies.com. And then I've got Frankenskies2.com to keep people updated on the progress of the sequel. And on there, you can actually upload images and I believe short clips of chemtrails too. So I'm turning that into a kind of like a social chemtrail kind of geoengineering sharing hub sort of space.
So you and I had a brief chat yesterday on the phone, and kind of the premise of our chat was to see how we could like connect all these dots together, because we're dealing with a really, really big picture. Everything from carbon offsets, carbon credits, Green New Deal, Agenda 2030, smart cities, complete surveillance grids, weather modification, weather control. I mean, we are really trying to wrap our arms around a huge paradigm shift. And we'll do our best here in the next 2 hours to try to condense it and connect all the dots. But why don't we start with chemtrails and geoengineering? Because we've been dealing with this now in my reality, in my timeline. I've been noticing and dealing with the quote unquote chemtrail reality since 1990, late 1996, early 1997 for me. That's when I first started to really notice. And then shortly thereafter, Clifford Carnicom started to really dig into what was going on up there and doing a lot of sample studies, and that really got my attention. And we've been taking this chaff in for how long now, Matt? How long have we been sucking in this cocktail from the skies?
Well, the mid 90s is when people really started seeing the uptick in the spraying. They've been sharpening their tools for some time. Frankenskies is a historical chronological timeline documentary that goes through weather engineering and how it got to where it's at. It starts off in the 1920s. So they were getting their abilities together in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. As far as like major chemtrail spraying, I would say the late 80s, early 90s is when that really started to get going, but especially around 2001 when the Department of Energy got involved and they started the tropospheric aerosol program. It really started getting deep then. But definitely in the mid 90s is when a lot of people say they started really noticing a big difference in their skies, and family photos started really changing and whatnot. Can I ask you where you grew up or where you live?
Well, when I was watching or witnessing what was happening up there, it was the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember even like there was one weekend I was helping my old man on their house with some gutter work. Excuse me. And I remember the day starting off with basically blue skies, and then they started to spray, and then the next thing I know, the sky is gray, the temperature changes, and I could even feel my mood change. I felt a little more tired, a little more run down. I'm like, this is, and I was aware of what was happening, but I was actually experiencing it in real time because I was outside most of the time. So this is really when my awareness around this, took root. So the Bay Area. Yeah.
Great. And a lot of people have like a story like that where they finally realized, oh, wow, something's actually going on, enough for me to look at the skies every time I'm out and about for the rest of my life, basically. I've talked to so many different people where they just have that opportunity. Maybe it's on the edge of a storm pattern, or they're outside all day, like you said. For me, I was out on a farm all day and I watched a storm getting quelled where they didn't want the rain to drop. So to answer your question, we've been getting hit really hard for about 30 years. So those of us that are 30 years old, our entire lives, we've been, absorbing this aluminum and learning about detoxing and mineralizing and understanding what we're dealing with and how to rise above it is really important.
So you mentioned that they've been fine tuning this since the 20s, and I believe there's patents out there, right, for going way back into the 20s, 30s, all the way up through really the 90s when this has really proliferated. So can you shed some light on some of that patent technology that was around for a while?
Well, yeah, when you get into the chemtrails, it's hard to sink your teeth into it, and it's a really important topic. Of course, it's our sky, it's our air, it's our who gets sunlight and all that. But to really convey the message to your friend, family, peers, and whatnot, they want to know the who, what, why, where, when, all this stuff, to be able to understand it and to be able to grasp it and convey it and to pass the message on. And the patents are very palpable. And if you think about it, when someone patents something, it's because they've come out with that technology. It's not an idea at that point. It's it's coming to fruition. They don't want anybody to take the technology they've actually created. So the patents, when I do these I give presentations on this topic. It's so convoluted and wordy, and just to digest even the difference between the terminology of contrails, chemtrails, geoengineering, and all the trickery thereof, it takes a couple hour presentation with slideshows and to really dig into it. And when I'm going there, when I'm doing it, I try to get, as simple as I can to describe it and whatnot. And there's lists of patents going all the way back. Some of them that are really fascinating are just the different means by which the patents came out, the different means by which they are patenting aerosolizing of these heavy metals and making these fake clouds. One of my favorites is a 1974 NASA patent for a barium release rocket. And when you start to really look at the skies, there are rockets. There's drones, and then there's rockets that are actually going more up, straight up looking, and they're releasing a different looking plume, and they're mixing these different chemicals. There's an entire elaborate, orchestrated. I mean, it's unreal what's going on in our skies on an almost.
So they have an array of delivery systems.
Exactly, well put. Yeah. Yes, I like to call them short trails, medium trails, long trails. But the short trails that people say, oh no, that's a contrail. That's not true. Those are just chemicals being sprayed to mix with other chemicals. More often than not, the short trails are like a primer gas where they're priming the sky, and then the next day or later on in the day, they'll come back with the longer trails to mix with. But sometimes you'll see them side by side mixing the chemicals. All you have to do is just start watching the sky and asking questions, and a lot can be answered, and then more questions pile on. But that's the way you got to dig down the rabbit hole.
We've seen some videos, I think originating in Dubai, where they have these on land weather machines that create these cloud immersion kinds of experiences. And so that's what we can see, right? That's the tech that they're showing us. Have you come across any other ground to air transmissions of geoengineering?
So that's a great question, and yes. And it's so intricate and involved. I think it might have been J. Edgar Hoover, but the quote, when the American public is faced with a conspiracy so vast, the bigger the conspiracy, the more easy it is for them to just dismiss it. Like, how could they spend so much money on a day-to-day basis? And everything is so involved. The entire hydrological system in the world, let's just say North America, it's controlled, So we've got what you referenced, I believe they're called surface. I forget the exact terminology, but what they're doing is they're making steam off of the ocean, basically. And so it doesn't matter how deep the water is, they just make steam off of it. And then once the steam comes off, you can manage those clouds. You can input into those clouds that you're making chemicals or whatever you want to make the geoengineering. So what is going on in the United States is we've got nuclear power plants. So to really wrap your head around what's going on in a nuclear power plant, it seems really primitive. We've split the atom and made this crazy nuclear reaction, and then we just dump water on it so we can get steam to spin turbines, right?
Right.
It's like, okay, we're just making steam out of this, but we've made this ongoing chemical reaction that's like, you can't stop, Right. And so I think that's ironic. But there's all of this steam coming out of a nuclear power plant, for instance, constantly. And so that's a cloud creation device. And so when I found this document from 2001, right before 9/11, it was released in March 2001, called the Tropospheric Aerosol Program, TAP, from the Department of Energy. And I started realizing the Department of Energy is one of the major players in the geoengineering, it's fascinating, and it gets into this left-right paradigm, and we can get into it later on. But what's really what everyone needs to grasp is that the opposition to geoengineering is big oil, dirty energy, Department of Energy, and they're playing this role of the opposition to geoengineering so that they can control the dialogue, and it's a Hegelian dialectic, kind of like cornering us into thinking, well, we've got to think the opposite of what they're doing. It's reverse psychology. So they say global warming is not real, big oil and whatnot. And then they say, therefore, we don't need to act on it and dim the sun with geoengineering. And so the public who is forced to kind of think the opposite of them goes to the left and says, well, we want to be green, and somehow green is now dimming the sun with geoengineering. It's so convoluted and upside down. But either way, we've got power plants all around the country, and they're emitting plumes of moisture. And those plumes of moisture are clouds. It's a constant creation of clouds. And where they need to fill in the gaps, they create their own cloud moisture creation devices off the coast, the Pacific, Atlantic, Gulf of Mexico, what have you. And so you've got these moisture plumes coming up like constantly, and they're managed. So they turn into clouds, and they're managed as part of our hydrological system. We've also got natural systems coming off the ocean, the jet stream and all that, and all that's also managed. And then the natural jet streams get chemicals inputted into them and whatnot. But some of the chemical clouds are made from the ground up, if that made sense.
Yeah, it does. It does make sense. One of the components for geoengineering for a long time in many people's minds has been HAARP, that HAARP would interact with what was being sprayed, and they would have this kind of ionospheric kind of dance going on with HAARP. And I've been doing a little bit of research on HAARP in Alaska, and it looks like for the most part, that's been shut down, meaning that it's now in the hands of the University of Anchorage, right? Fairbanks, Anchorage, which says to me that they've really just scaled down the HAARP technology and made it smaller and put it in other locations so it can do the same thing roughly, but spread out over a greater area and do it without a lot of like focus and fanfare. So what's the update on the HAARP technology, and where have you seen it being deployed now?
Well, they're everywhere. Those golf ball looking things. They look like big old golf balls, and they call them NextRad and Doppler. And the claim is that they're predicting the weather, but they're actually controlling the weather. You know, it's like hidden in plain sight right there. And it's exactly what you said, scaled down, like they shrank the technology. The news that came out that rippled through the conspiracy world is HAARP has been shut down. And it was not only an admission that HAARP even existed, because that was kind of on the cuff, but it was also like, oh, that's over. You don't need to worry about it anymore. Kind of just like when Trump came in, they said, oh, Trump stopped the spraying. People told me that. And I looked at the sky and I'm like, no,
Yeah,
no,
right.
no, he
But
didn't.
dude, that's the good spray.
Yeah.
You see, that's the good spray that's going to get rid of the bad spray.
Yeah, actually, I've been told that it's the good spray. And I'm just like, oh, really? He went single-handedly and switched it all out. Thank you, everyone, for that one. But it's unreal. So the HAARP technology, it was like a kind of a weird bait and switch, because everyone thinks, oh, they turned it off. It's over now. Don't worry. They're not doing it. They've admitted it, and now they turned it off, and it's all good. They passed it on. Well, what happened is this the acronym of HAARP, HAARP, Highly Active Auroral Research Program. It's these antenna arrays that pick a focal point in the atmosphere and then have intersecting radio waves to basically microwave a point in the atmosphere. It can be like 100 square mile point in the atmosphere. Either way, microwave in the atmosphere to create high pressure, to steer jet streams, cause heat waves, drought, and all this sort of stuff. So instead of just having that HAARP station in Alaska and steering jet streams thousands of miles away, yes, they mobilized it even. They've got them on aircraft carriers, and they show up for the Haitian earthquake and whatnot. And that's why Hugo Chavez is accusing the US government of pointing at the fault lines, and that technology does exist. They don't just microwave the atmosphere in conjunction with the chemtrails to alter the weather and cause climate change, global warming, all that sort of stuff, but also earthquakes can be caused and seemingly have been caused by this technology. So you can see them sometimes when you're driving down the freeway. They're these big golf balls that look like the size of like a big building.
Yep.
And in there are basically radar, spinning radar things that shoot, pick focal points in the atmosphere and have radio waves intersecting to microwave them. There's so many all across the country that they work in conjunction with one another. And I've seen electromagnetic maps of the country watching these things all zap at the same time to steer patterns and everything every single drop of rain that comes out, every weather event, anything that happens now, I know it sounds crazy, but I honestly believe that it's all controlled. Everything, if you got rain, someone said it was okay. If you don't, it's because they're doing that like that on purpose. I'm in a region that's becoming very drought-stricken by design, and the end game seems to be to kind of push people out of this region, I think.
Yeah. That's my sense too. Let's talk about the composition of what they actually spray. I think that just like the technology has changed, the composition has changed too. Can you give people a sense as to kind of where it's been and some of the makeup that Clifford Carnicom was pulling apart like in the late 90s, and how it's been altered, and where are we now? Like, what are they actually dispersing now?
That's a great question, and I love Clifford. I've interviewed him in Sedona and had him at the Tucson conference as well, and he's a great researcher. For those of you that don't know the Carnicom Institute, you can find that online to find a lot of research on the chemtrails. So first off, people are wondering what's being sprayed. Everyone's looking at the sky when it first started happening in the early 90s, and especially when it's being sprayed on the forest. It's like, what is going on? Well, people had to do their own research. They tested their blood and their hair, and especially rainwater samples. What goes up must come down. And when there's a lot of spraying on the edge of a storm, and then you get rain, and you test that rain, and it's got all these heavy metals in it that shouldn't be up there anyway, that wouldn't stay up there that long. They're not from China. They're not from some coal burning plant thousands of miles away, especially with high levels. There's a lot in there. Sometimes it seems like it's just literally coal fly ash, which is back to the Department of Energy. You've got these scrubbers in your coal power plants, and they're supposed to be filtering out the dirty soot, and they do. But then they take the scrubbers and they clean them out, and they have this disgusting coal fly ash. It's the soot from that, and it goes right to the Air Force Base. And I think it gets cleaned up a little bit so they can take out certain heavy metals, but it gets they put it right back in our atmosphere. So in the coal fly ash, you've got nano particulate size, titanium, cadmium, strontium, aluminum, mercury, lead, all sorts of dirty stuff. So that's like one answer to your question. Another answer to your question is, with rainwater analysis, you've got to, when you send in the rainwater, you've got to tell them what you want to test it for. So as activists, we're like, doing the research on the patents, like what could be sprayed to modify the weather. And okay, well, it seems like the primary constituents are X, Y, Z. So the primary constituents are barium, aluminum, and strontium. And those things are charged different ways and mixed in the atmosphere to do their bidding and whatnot. Aluminum oxide and barium salts, which are the two major ones, these are patented fire accelerants. So these patented fire accelerants are being put in the trees, by the trees. They're being sprayed on these fires. Instead of making it rain on these fires, they're making windstorms. They're spraying fire accelerants on them and what have you. Deeper research with Carnicom is synthetic, weirder stuff. Frozen blood cells to carry bacterial and viral payloads and whatnot to experiment on the public. In Frankenskies, this reporter discloses the U.S. Air Force was experimenting on the city of St. Louis, spraying radioactive zinc cadmium sulfide. Radioactive cadmium was being sprayed on the ghettos of St. Louis, primarily children, via planes and on top of buildings. And they even outfit freaking station wagons and went through the city streets and sprayed it on kids as they played to see how many kids would freaking die from this. I mean,
what year was this?
Mid-70s. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So that's something then to answer your question, like radioactive zinc.
Right.
But there's Morgellons and really weird futuristic stuff that's coming up in it, and nanotech and all this jazz. And I think that it's this toxic combination. They get the fluoride in the water, and there's Teflon, polytetrafluoroethylene is on these blue masks, and you get this one chemical in everybody kind of thing. And then you put another chemical in the sky, like just aluminum, nanoparticulate aluminum mixing with fluoride. Those two were bonded together before they were smelted. So they came from the same source.
That's right.
They like to have a chemical reaction in your brain and all these things together, then 5G and whatnot. So it's getting deeper and more complex and more biological. There's more possibilities of spraying like flu bugs and whatever and what have you. And when you have these things laden with the metal, and then you've got more systems on the ground like 5G antennas everywhere and whatnot to basically zap this dust, they can elevate it longer and impact people more. It's been hard for the powers that be, the they. It's such a trigger word, so I try not to say it. But either way, it's been hard for they to keep these, to spray this stuff and then to have it still in the air at ground level. It falls, it glops together, sulfur and all the different things that they spray. And once it gets to ground level, it kind of blops down. So it's been hard for them to get it to be aerosolized in our like ground level so we can breathe it in. So I think that the towers help to zap it and keep it together. And the mixing of the different charged particles, they're getting really good at laying out certain chemicals and then zapping them with the ground-based stations. And then they're charged one, like one will be crazy negatively charged, and then they'll spray something positively charged and it'll mix together and they're causing these chemical reactions. They're just playing with the atmosphere and seeing what they can do at this point. It seems like that they're just getting better and better with their weird technology. You're starting to see all these weird new clouds, and they even had to come out with 12 new cloud classifications.
12 new cloud classifications.
Yeah, new cloud names, and that's in the end of Frankenskies as well.
Yeah.
I was really trying to get the movie out, and then right before I released it, geoengineering and the normalization of spraying the skies came to the media with these new clouds and everything. I was able to include that in the movie, which was amazing.
So one of the things that really blew my mind when, back in the day when Clifford was doing this, was that he had discovered that there was desiccated blood with cancer cells inside, this delivery, in a batch of, chemtrail goo. And I'm like, man, this is just really flat out evil shit, right? Just evil shit.
Well, it's an all-out attack on humanity and the delivery. What better way? The air, right? I mean, they can taint our water with fluoride and what have you, and they can taint our food with glyphosate and whatnot. But the aerosolization of everything. I mean, if you start to research Wilhelm Reich and learn about positive and negative energy, when they zap the sky and do their negative bidding, there's this result called deadly orgone energy. It's like the opposite of life force energy. Like you think cancer blood cells or Morgellons and all this evil nanotech is bad. The opposite of life force energy is just like death on a stick. I mean, it's no bueno. It's like the worst thing. And like we can be charged by chi and thrive on negative ions or orgone energy, but we live in a world of duality and balance, yes, but the powers, they know that we don't know what is actually going on, so we can't bring that balance to it. So when they really get at it and zap the sky like crazy and do way too much, there's this like fallout that looks like a layer of just like goopy like brown clouds that come out of the radiation once they've hit it, and that I think is probably pretty bad for humanity and all life on Earth.
So this really hadn't jumped into my awareness until about 30 seconds ago, but we talk about the geoengineering and the effects of the geoengineering on our environment. What about the social engineering? Because people seem to have like bifurcated into at least two separate species now. And I have some thoughts about the role of vaccines in general that might play a part in that. But I've never really considered that what's going on in the sky isn't just changing our environment, but it's changing our psychology, our emotions, and how we interact with this so-called reality. Have you looked into the social engineering component of what's going on up there?
Well, when I first got, I try to cover all my bases and really dig into this rabbit hole. And when I first started getting into the chemtrail space, a lot of theories were surfacing. Well, first there was the idea that maybe they're trying to block Planet X or Nibiru or something in the evening sky, and that was interesting. And also there was this theory that maybe they were trying to terraform the planet so that it could be more suitable for evil alien race.
Right.
Or something
Alien
like
stuff.
that,
Yeah. Right. Yep.
So that isn't necessarily what I think is true, but the terraforming of humanity on a vibratory level, okay, I think that there is an attempt through transhumanism to make humanity steer into a direction of holding a lower vibration, basically, collectively. And that's all social engineering to steer us towards that.
Right.
I mean, it's
right.
total divide and conquer. It's taking away our senses, muffling our voice. I mean, by putting the mask on, everybody, our voice is our weapon. That's how we convey our messages to the world. That's how we say, don't step on my foot. Excuse me, I'm right here. That's how we own our sovereignty. That's how we are individuals, is our voice.
Right.
To muffle our voices, to take away a lot of senses. And I think it's steering us into we're being socially engineered and terraformed by all of it. And it's going to be a bait and switch kind of thing, I feel like. So now we're in this fear space, and we're okay, the we, not us, but the they. And I don't like to be like that, but the people that are taking all this bait, I mean, they're literally hook, line, and sinker taking all this. So if they're willing to double mask and to get all the boosters and to start eating the electroceutical, popping the pills that are nanotech and whatnot, and that's just going to completely steer humanity in a different direction. If you've ever looked into Rudolf Steiner, he talks about the humanity and this negative force. And I think that's what's kind of upon us, is this actual, call it Satan, call it whatever you want, but there's good and evil on earth. We live in duality, we live in polarity, and the evil really wants us to become robots, it seems. That's what I can gather. And to get us to that point, we need to consent to it. There needs to be disclosure of sorts, and there's some sort of karmic law that's being played out, and there's some sort of, I mean, I'm watching it, and it's, yes, we're being engineered, and what's going to happen is the switch from lockdowns for COVID to lockdowns for
climate,
the global warming or climate change or whatever. And
Yeah.
that is the engineering of humanity, to accept that. We have to be primed to be able to accept that. And it'll be through this fear and the policing of one another. We're already policing each other, who's gotten the jab, who's wearing the mask, and no, you can't work here anymore, and all this sort of nonsense. Everyone's losing their humanity. People are losing their empathy by covering up their face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's social engineering in and of itself. But the acceptance of blocking of the sun, which is right on the horizon. This is coming. I think it's next year, honestly, where, it's like this Klaus Schwab, and there seems to be this new world order, surfacing. And this Klaus Schwab, he seems to be the ringleader. And
he's the front man.
Yeah. And he says that we're going to own nothing and be happy and whatnot. But I don't think it's going to be COVID that is the trigger point or the push, the straw that broke the camel's back. I think this is all just the setup. They're getting the deck or the cards all lined, the dominoes, and the next thing is probably climate change. They're probably going to say that we all need to, because everything is now switched to, it's not even global warming anymore. The vernacular shifted, and every fire, every disaster that's geoengineered, they're saying, oh, it's climate change, we have to do something about it. And the people that are coming together for these climate protests and saying we need to do something about climate, they don't even realize that means blocking your sun with chemtrails, but they're consenting to it. And I think it's coming full circle. And we will be, once we're disconnected from the sun, our beings are going to be slowly kind of terraformed in a way to be able to vibrate on a lower level, to accept transhumanism reality, to vibrate on a lower level, to be able to accept this transfer of consciousness nonsense and all of this stuff it's not in our true destiny. We're supposed to be elevating way beyond this nonsense by now. Yeah. Nice kitty.
Yeah. She's nice on the internet. She's nice on the live stream. In person, yeah, you got a bit of an edge, don't you? So last summer, David Avocado Wolf came through town with a bunch of other people, and he was kind of going over the sort of the genesis of what happened with COVID. And one of the things that he said, and it actually made a lot of sense to me, was that in the beginning, early on, that they were targeting certain areas, like say, for instance, Italy, New York City, and they were actually spraying mRNA onto public surfaces like handrails, elevators. And by doing that, people were actually interacting with the mRNA, getting protein spikes, and then mimicking some of these symptoms that are associated with COVID. Have you found any evidence of mRNA inside of the chemtrails at all?
That's hard to say. No, that's it's tough because the chemtrails are so high up, and by the time they get to ground level, they're dissipated. It's hard to get a really good sample. As far as when the COVID first started happening, and there were hot spots and whatnot, what I experienced with my clothing line, I make these Faraday foam bags that totally kill your phone, and my phone bags stopped working in certain areas where
Really?
where 5G was being rolled out.
Yeah.
And where there's COVID hotspots as well, like Los Angeles and whatnot. And I had no idea what was going on. And I would never come out and say anything unless I'd really given it some thought and research. And I firmly believe that the 5G mesh network, it's complicated. Not everyone can totally even understand what this is. But basically for Verizon, all the iPhones are getting turned up onto a new broadband, a new bandwidth, and they're all repeating the signal to be able to make it exist. It's a mesh, like everything's a spoke in the system. So it's instead of having your cell phone interact with the cell tower and send it information, your cell phone's now a small cell tower, and it's repeating the signal and shooting it as far as it can, which is like 1,000 feet because it's a small carrier wave. And so it's being repeated. All these repeaters everywhere are their iPhones. So especially iPhones, and especially in these major cities, all of a sudden my Faraday foam bag stopped working because the phones were emitting, I would say about 20 times more radiation than before. People are carrying them on their person. They have no idea. Yeah. And then they're showing symptoms of radiation sickness, loss of taste.
Interesting.
And so what I did is I made double-lined bags, and the double-lined bags worked great. And I sent them out to all the customers that were having issues, and everyone was happy. Well, I kid you not. And this is just my life, and you trust me for what it's worth or whatever, but I kid you not, right when the Delta variant started happening in certain places like Portland and LA, people contacted me and said, dude, your double line bag doesn't work. I'm starting to get calls through it. I've got customers contacting me now that loved my bags for a year, and just in the past week or two, they're just getting phone calls right through the bag. And it's because the network is getting cranked up again. And then there's a surge in COVID cases again. And people are having all these symptoms again. And they're not dying from these low-level radiation sickness symptoms. Their bodies are just adjusting to it slowly but surely after a couple weeks,
Wow. So this is an amazing connection that a lot of the COVID symptoms are related to radiation poisoning.
Yeah, I firmly believe that. I can actually attest to it. I've got such a reach now with my company, and I've got friends. I've even got friends that were coming down with, they thought COVID, and they got one of my hoodies, and they blocked themselves from the EMF, and they are not sick anymore. But especially, I think, I've talked to people who just got an upgrade to the new iPhone, then they had the Samsung phone before, and then right when they got the phone, they got loss of taste. That is a radiation sickness symptom. It's never been a viral symptom or anything like that. So at the end of the day, yeah, I firmly believe that, especially the iPhones, because I've got EMF radiation meters, I can see the increase in the radiation, and they're literally penetrating these bags. The bags, I wasn't reinventing the wheel. The company that makes these bags, they've been making them for over a decade, and they've sold probably 1 million of them all over the world. One layer of this silver fabric, and it's worked just fine. But now Verizon especially has cranked it up so much that this product that was made to quell the signals, Faraday foam bag, doesn't work. The double layered bags now don't work. And now I didn't mention, I make 3 layered bags now just for these 5G people that are slowly contacting me now, but they're few and far between. I do feel though it'll become more commonplace, because to have this Internet of Things system work and to have self-driving cars and all this instant everything everywhere, it requires everything being involved. I mean, like toasters are going to be repeating the signal, not just your phone and your smart meter and your Wi-Fi router and your small cell tower out front of your window. Everything's going to be pushing the signal around to have it do its bidding.
Right. So we'll be bathed in this electromagnetic field constantly, and all of it reporting back to some centralized location where they're reporting whether or not we're good boys or good girls, or bad boys or bad girls, and eating the right food or leaving something in a refrigerator too long, or whatever those things are. So we're talking about a really pervasive surveillance system that's all about command and control. And they're linking it to the environment. And the environment obviously is going to be influenced by what's happening in the skies. And it all starts with the skies. The skies, the environment. So that's why I wanted to start with the chemtrail and the geoengineering piece, because it sets the stage for everything else. Am I right about that?
Always. Yes, definitely. And it's, I mean, even for people that are waking up to the truth, so many people have contacted me and they said, Matt, if I hadn't seen the movie Frankenskies, I never would have known that all of this was a lie when COVID came out. I mean, it's both sides of it. If you can see the lines in the sky and turn a blind eye, then you can go down this path of lies. But if you can see the writing on the wall and see what's going on, you can lead a totally different, life. But also, if they can control aerosolized injections of whatever, if we okay this publicly, then they can dose us with whatever they want all the time, anytime, and it'll be like a public consent kind of thing. You said earlier about bathing in all of this radiation. The more they put out the 5G, we'll just be bathing in it. And it's true, we will be. But the thing is, we already are bathing in radiation. We have AM radio waves going through us right now, FM radio waves going through us right now. And all of this tech has been designed to be harmless. That's what's important, the most important thing. An AM radio wave is 100 feet tall. And because it's so huge, it can go rather far. But also, when it goes through us, it doesn't impact us because our cells aren't 100 feet tall. We're not 100 feet tall. It doesn't bifurcate our cells or do anything like that. It doesn't even absorb into us, goes right through us. But the 5G system is the smallest carrier wave ever used. And by having smaller carrier waves, you can cram more data on that and have faster download speeds, more oscillations per second, more hertz. But when you are dealing with carrier waves this measured in millimeters, which is what the 5G system is intended to be, those carrier waves, we are millimeters. We are everything, our body is designed at a certain ratios, and our cells and whatnot are measured in nanometers, and we fall into this spectrum where the 5G lies. So when the 5G hits us and water and trees and everything in the environment, it actually absorbs into it. It doesn't go right through us like an FM radio wave or Wi-Fi even. Wi-Fi goes through us. Wi-Fi oscillates, but it's about a foot in height. And being that large, it can go through a brick wall and go through us, and it doesn't absorb into us. It can cause problems, but it's not absorbing to us all the time and causing like severe impact. The 5G, it'll be absorbing into us all the time. And I firmly believe that children conceived in this environment and born and raised in this environment, they're going to have some serious issues, probably not able to procreate, to reproduce, So the understanding, I mean, like if you go back to the real history of the world, I believe they had wireless tech. I mean, had wireless tech at these world fairs.
Oh yeah.
Wireless tech was out. It existed, and it was harmless. Okay, and free energy existed. This 5G is very predatory. As it has unfolded, people have been getting sick and whatnot. And is it corollary? Is it causal? Can we prove it? Are we ever going to get to the bottom of that? That's a question. But also, I don't know if you've heard about all these birds dying in Virginia. This whole generation of birds came out blind, And if you understand the developmental harms that a millimeter-sized wave could do to develop a developing fetus or developing little baby bird and whatnot, it starts to make sense that this is going to be catastrophic if they let it really roll out. And also, I just read in the Wall Street Journal, and I've been reading a lot about this, is the 5G carrier wave interferes with airplanes. So they have a communication system, internal communication system with the planes, and they use a similar carrier wave. So planes can't work with 5G. So I don't know how they're going to figure that out.
Well, don't they want to just like shut down air travel anyway? I mean, isn't that
Yeah, they want everything isolated. It seems
kind of a
like
convenient lever to pull right around this time? So, all right, let's try to piece this all together now. So we have the 5G network, which theoretically will be the hub of the smart cities, where people will have to theoretically congregate because there will be no services in the rural areas. And based on what I've been reading and uncovering, there's going to start to claim eminent domain on large chunks of farmland so that they can do this carbon recapture stuff. And as a result of that, there'll be just less available land to live on, grow food on. And where are you with the grand solar minimum and just the natural cycle that we seem to be going through, which seems to be a colder, drier cycle?
Well, and also with the cities, they'll have with the 5G AI in place, they'll be able to put in a social credit system. I think the social credit system will start with cameras just taking everyone's temperature all the time, so that we don't need to, worry about all that, and it'll be a slippery slope to a technocratic dystopia. So for the grand solar minimum, I question any fancy narrative like that at all, any fancy word like geoengineering, because a lot of people pass the buck on to the specialists and they don't want to think outside the box because we've been programmed that way. I mean, it goes back to Edward Bernays, trust the specialist, trust your doctor. He got cigarette sexy, fluoride in the water, bacon on the American breakfast plate,
right,
and especially was able to warp the minds of the public, the American public, to be compartmentalized. Oh, I'm not a rocket scientist, I can't think like that, and they do that for everything.
That's a really good point.
So I got off track. What was your question?
We're talking about the grand solar minimum.
Oh yeah, so the grand solar minimum, to me, it's a fancy word that comes out of NASA or something like that, and I don't really subscribe to it because it sounds like an excuse for action, like geoengineering or something like that. So the grand solar minimum says that the sun is going to go into. So this is all part of like the Trump stop the spraying and change the ingredients on all sort of the Q thing. So in my opinion, so the grand solar minimum says that the sun is getting less hot and we're going to be going into a cooling and ice age. And so there's a whole camp out there that says that the geoengineering, the ongoing chemtrails that we see. So there's a difference between chemtrails and geoengineering. Those are two different terms. The word geoengineering means spraying aerosolized chemicals in the atmosphere to dim the sun, to increase the albedo or the reflectivity of the atmosphere, so that we don't get so much sunlight, so that we can slow down the supposed heating of the planet that I don't believe is even happening. Right. So there's a whole camp out there that says that the geoengineering is, and they don't want to tell us the truth, that the geoengineering is actually to create a greenhouse effect to save us from the grand solar minimum. And so the chemtrails are actually good because, and they do make a greenhouse effect. So there's truth in there. Mm-hmm. So the idea of geoengineering to make us safe from the heating of the planet is totally bunk, because if you put a layer of metal in the atmosphere, some sunlight will still get through and it'll get trapped. It'll make that whole greenhouse effect that we've always been worried about, Mm-hmm. And then they say, once we start, we can't stop. We'll have to keep spraying more to save us. It'll just create more and more greenhouse effect. I mean, like it's quite obvious, in my opinion, it's not going to do what they think. And if it does do what they think, it'll completely backfire and throw us into an ice age. I'm not buying anything out of NASA. NASA has a budget of $50 million a day. They have a full-on chemtrail program called CARE, C-A-R-E, which stands for, and it's ironic that they call it CARE, Charge Aerosol Release Experiment. They have a fleet of planes and drones, and they spray aluminum, barium, strontium in the atmosphere to make, quote, noctilucent clouds. This is all public record. And you can look up their whole program. They have, fleets of planes and drones and whatnot. And I believe some of that grand solar minimum stuff comes out of them. So I'm suspicious. What do you think?
Well, some of the people that I've followed a little bit here, like the Ice Age farmer, David Dubine, they have pointed out that there are cycles in history where it does seem like there are cooler, drier periods. And based on this kind of cyclic pattern, it seems to be that we're actually moving, kind of closer to one now. And what's really interesting is that David had a guy on. I didn't agree with everything the guy said, but he had a really interesting timeline and graph and chart. And he said that every time we reach a really warm, wet period, there tends to be this kind of peak with civilization. There's like a high degree of debauchery. There's a high degree of the beginning of like a civil war period. And he was able to actually go through this timeline, if you believe that timeline. Okay, that's a whole other thing, right? You got to, kind of buy into a particular timeline. But if you chart it, there are definitely these peaks and these valleys that correspond with these wet, hot periods, and then cold, dry periods. And so socially, we're at that point. We've been at that wet, hot period, and it seems to mirror like what was going on during Rome, where they had the Roman baths and, homosexuality, and they start to bring in, Caesar brings in all these different groups of people into Rome so he could water down the Senate, right? I mean, these conditions seem to be cyclical in a lot of ways. So then there's this drop off, and then everything moves into a very different phase, very different period. And based on that model, it actually makes a lot of sense. Now, from the fourth turning, the cycles of the fourth turning, we are theoretically in the winter of the fourth turning. And I don't know if you can make a correspondence with that and this cold, dry period that is connected to these grand solar minimum cycles, but it clearly feels like that's where we are. I mean, the sort of the green rush of discovery and the pioneer spirit that comes out of the post-war America in the 1950s, that's all gone. And right now we're really moving, it feels like, into this kind of emotionally, spiritually barren and sterile time, which connects into this fourth turning and this cold, dry spell. Now, some of this could be socially engineered. I have no doubt that a lot of reality is socially engineered. There seems to be a bit of a there, and for me, the geoengineering / chemtrails is the wild card, and they could push it any way they want to push it. They could push it to mimic the grand solar minimum. They could say, oh, well, look, this is what's happening. And the grand solar minimum is actually really happening. There's something going on with the sun. There's something going on with other luminaries in the sky. And they're essentially taking control of that process. And then they roll out all the stuff that they want to roll out with the carbon credits, or they can push it in another direction. So I feel like they can use the geoengineering to kind of guide the narrative or hide the narrative. That's my sense. And, last year, and I know this was all engineered anyway, but here in Texas, we had this massive storm, which we've never had before. And I think that's one of those examples of, if they want to, they can just, flip a switch and change the weather. And now you got a whole new narrative that you're playing with. But I would say, based on these cycles, that there seems to be a there. And it has to do with the fourth turning and these kind of wet, hot periods and these cold, dry periods. and some of the social factors that go along with it. That's my 2 cents.
Very interesting. I think also to incorporate the cycles in astrology, I think we go through big shifts when different planetary forces are dominant in the sky and whatnot. And the occult, they know a lot more about that than we do. So the powers that be, I don't know. I mean, I don't know to what degree the eclipses or whatever are engineered. I know we're going into some historic eclipse, and there seems to be more and more and more eclipses all the time, and that's actually.
Well, we went through an eclipse that was 6 hours, but it was I think 3 hours really in the heart of the eclipse, and we haven't had an eclipse like that since 1440, and
right.
Really quite something. And I was looking back in 1440, and I think the most, again, if you're playing with that timeline, the most significant event in 1440 was the transference of power to Moctezuma in the Aztec Empire. And Moctezuma becomes this kind of legendary plunderer of all these other tribes in Central America, Mexico and Central America. So he rises to power during that last eclipse that lasted this long. And I'm wondering if something similar will happen as a result of this eclipse, that there will be some individual that will rise to power in a similar way. But before you got on the show, I was talking about Joe Biden, and Joe Biden's sun sign is, I believe, 28 degrees Scorpio. So this eclipse happened in exact opposition with his sun sign. And I was on, you know, Clyde Lewis. Have you ever been on Clyde's show?
Yeah, a handful of times, and he's in Frankenskies as well. And he came and spoke at the conference I hosted in Portland.
So I was on Clyde's show last night, and I was talking about this eclipse. And I talked specifically about Biden. I said, this eclipse is not going to bode well for Biden. And the kind of the bookend of the eclipse is going to be in May. And then sure enough, like less than 24 hours later, Biden's going in for colonoscopy. And today, Kamala Harris is president. Like, for how long he's going to be in his colonoscopy, who knows, right? But that's like a really specific symbolic eclipse moment. You know, like his power for, who knows, the weekend. I don't know what's going to happen. His power, his identity, his role has been eclipsed by Kamala Harris. So I think that there is a there with these alignments, whether they're plotted out by the so-called elite or not. There definitely seems to be a there. And in terms of where we are astrologically with all this stuff, you know, we went into this period with Saturn and Jupiter in the conjunction in Aquarius on the 21st of December in 2020. And this is where I think the, you know, humanity's story is really evolving. You know, we have a top-down system with Saturn. This is how it's going to go, right? So we have Klaus Schwab, and you know, we want to, you know, sacrifice everything, which is very Saturnian. We want to save the planet, and then Jupiter comes in and wants to do something different and wants to kind of expand the potential and expand what we can do, taking it outside of exactly what you were talking about, which is the specialist and trusting the doctors and trusting the scientists. Jupiter Aquarius doesn't want to do that. Jupiter Aquarius wants to determine what's right, or what's the right thing to do based on its own informed consent. So we're in this really interesting 20-year cycle of seeing how this thing is going to unfold. With that, I'd love to ask you, because you seem really dialed in on the mechanisms of how this stuff works and how it's put together. What about some solutions? I know you've got your clothing line and the protective stuff, but what else? Solutions, potential, hope. Are there other technologies? Are there things that we're not paying attention to because our attention is being directed in another place?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. And I'm glad you brought up the Jupiter aspect because that incorporates the trusting of yourself and the cultivation of your inner truth and not taking authority as the truth. You know, Saturn wants you giving it all away, basically, and waiting for Saturn to come back because Saturn's not the dominant planet in the sky right now. So the idea is to get us worshiping Saturn unknowingly through trickery, you know, through the worship of the cube and the phone and the technology and the square on the TV and all that sort of stuff.
Right, right.
But I think firstly and foremost is empowerment through knowledge and elevating yourself to a vibration of truth. And as you start to absorb these truths and acknowledge and become aware of these truths and being an authentic, genuine human being, you can resonate on a vibration of truth where other truths become self-evident. So that's first and foremost. Taking your health into your own hands and acknowledging and honoring the power of your body and your immune system, you know, like knowing that we're under attack on so many levels is important. And then coming out of that and empowering yourself out of that is the biggest thing that you can do, not to live in a victimhood cycle, right? So we can become mineralized. There's so many different things. I've got a short little story. Last year I broke my arm, and when I was in the hospital, I was given all of the different opiates you can imagine, fentanyl and oxys and all this sort of stuff. And after getting surgery on my arm and whatnot, I came out of the hospital. It's 11 a.m. where I live right now. So I came out of the hospital, and I've been trying to recover from that surgery. It's been a year. And what I realized is those pharmaceuticals stripped my body of minerals, completely demineralized me. And I was having a struggle uptaking minerals and getting back up to speed where I could actually build muscle and recover and whatnot. I learned about Irish sea moss and taking these supplements that are mineral rich, bioavailable, plant-based minerals. And after just a week, or after 2 days of taking these bladderwrack, sea moss, and one more, it's a mix and it makes it more bioavailable. I feel amazing. So understanding minerals and mineralizing, our body only needs 110 minerals. You better believe when you go to the grocery store, that food, it wasn't grown in soil that has 110 minerals. No one's adding silver and gold and palladium and all these, and boron and all these things to their soil. All they need is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium to grow anything. So to get your mineral fix with plant-based minerals is so important. I was traveling and I went to Utah and learned about these plant-based water-soluble minerals. And some of these water-soluble mineral supplements, some of them are called, when your water is cleaned out and doesn't have any minerals, you can remineralize your water. So you can get those mineralizing water things too. What's unbelievable is on these lists of minerals, of all the different things, the constituents in these minerals from these ancient forests that were compressed over time, and now there's these supplements that are based on these compressed forests, plant-based, easily digestible. And in these constituents are aluminum, barium, strontium, and these things that we think are bad for us, right? Heavy metals, but they're not heavy metals. They're the minerals that are on the periodic table that would be in our soil if our soil was the way it was 100 years ago. And literally by being up to speed, by having these minerals in our body, like plant-based aluminum and whatnot, you can be so mineralized that you're not absorbing toxins from the environment. So learning about that is so important. So someone else out there that's super mineral deficient, their bones need magnesium, their bones need calcium, and their bones are absorbing anything they can get to get those minerals. So they go and drink Coca-Cola and go out in the chemtrail air, and the body's absorbing whatever it can, and it mistakes other things for calcium and magnesium. So
that's really interesting.
So it's uptaking radioactive cadmium, hopeful that because it's similar to calcium, and instead you get radioactive cadmium in your bones. But if you're up to speed on this and you understand what magnesium is, it's education about ourselves is one of the most important things. When you ingest sugar, for every molecule of sugar that you ingest, it takes 54 molecules of magnesium to process one molecule of sugar. So 54 to 1 ratio. So just knowing that, we learn about how do I get back up to speed on my magnesium, Epsom salt baths, topical magnesium, leafy greens, wheatgrass shots, anything green. The central atom in the chlorophyll molecule, so chlorophyll is green stuff, the central atom in the chlorophyll molecule is magnesium. So we start learning, oh, this is how I get my magnesium. Like my journey, I always think that I know so much. And I'm always learning, just incorporating this Irish sea moss, which is a mineral-dense fasting herb I learned about from Dr. Sebi, S-E-B-I, who talks about nutrition and alkaline and alkali.
He's famous.
Yeah, he's amazing. This Irish sea moss, which is just like, it's like kelp, it's just a seaweed, that alone has changed my life. You know, just from understanding that my body was completely stripped of minerals from the pharmaceuticals, from being in the hospital. You know, years ago, I was given a antibiotic called ciprofloxacin. I didn't even need the antibiotic, but Cipro, it's a fluoride pill essentially, and it gave me abrupt tendon rupture, and I couldn't walk. I couldn't do anything after just 2 or 3 of these pills. You know, learning about the harms of the pharmaceutical. You know, there's no coincidence that the word harm is in big pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
So I think just snapping away from all of that and empowering ourselves and embracing, like there's so many simple little things. Like someone will go to the grocery store and they won't know what's GMO, what's not. If it's got a little 4 on the beginning of the barcode, that's conventional. And that means it can be sprayed with glyphosate and whatnot. It's important to buy organic. Why is it important to buy organic? Well, especially the Dirty Dozen, which is a dozen of thin-skinned vegetables and fruits. It's sprayed with chemicals like glyphosate. And these chemicals, they're on your food, and then when you get them in your body, it disrupts your ability to uptake minerals. Like there's a preservative, I believe it's called TBH. There's a preservative, BHT.
BHT, yeah.
There's a preservative. It's in ramen noodles and bugles, and it's in a lot of things. When you ingest ramen noodles and you get BHT in your system, your body cannot uptake a whole list of minerals like iron and all these things for 48 hours. For 2 days, your body is not only mineral deprived, but it cannot even uptake. You can eat a salad and all this stuff. It doesn't even absorb it anymore. So just understanding these things and then incorporating them and then being inspired and empowered by this knowledge and not being a victim, that is the most important thing to me, first and foremost. It's just like learn about the blue mask. If you have to wear a mask, get a cotton one. Go online and type in PTFE mask and then look up the images and you'll see the polytetrafluoroethylene masks, which are these one-time use medical masks, the blue masks. You know, they're not meant to be used like people are using them. And you're breathing through a layer of Teflon, which is synthetic fluoride, and this thing came from China. You're most likely huffing chemicals that you shouldn't be huffing. To what? For what? For what? For why? You know, to what ends?
It looks like there's like little nano creatures in some of them too.
Yeah, I mean, there's no regulation. I mean, you're literally putting this thing to your face. It came right from China. There's nobody watching this or caring or anything, and I think that it is, well, it's a slow but sure, it's a slow and steady cremation of care. If you know about the Bohemian Grove, these elitists come together on an annual basis and do this ceremony to kill their care for the world so they don't have a consciousness for the evil that they do. And it seems like that this is one big cremation of care where everyone's taking part in this ceremony where they're eliminating their senses, eliminating their care for the people that are actually standing up for the truth.
Right. Yeah, that's a really great point. Just at a mass level, they're just slaying their compassion on a daily basis. Here's a kind of a weird thought or something I've had. It actually has to do with toilet paper. And I have unpacked big rolls of toilet paper, and there seems to be an inordinate amount of dust on toilet paper.
I was thinking that recently just myself. I'm not even kidding. Keep going.
Yeah. So it's like, what are they doing to the toilet paper? What's really being embedded in the toilet paper? Because if you think about it, right, that is like the most vulnerable, easily accessible, and liminal part of the body that anybody could have any access to. So if you wanted to insert a technology into somebody without them knowing it, there you go. It's right there.
It's interesting you say that because recently I was on the can and I pulled some toilet paper like in half to like blow my nose, and there was this like dust. And
Yes.
I'm always so questionable and sketched out and wondering what's going on. And I held my breath.
Yep.
And I'm like, and I decided not to blow my nose with that, you know?
Yeah.
And I started thinking, there's no scrutiny or transparency. This came straight from China.
Absolutely.
Nobody knows what or how or anything like that. And I mean, this new world order power grab, every single country, it still dumbfounds me, blows my mind when I do watch TV or see a mainstream article and I see some city in another country and everybody's wearing blue masks. Like the entire world is doing this.
Yep.
And to have this happen all over the world all at once, not only did they need all of the media orchestrated and bought and all of the internet involved and all of, like this couldn't even have happened 20 years ago because there wasn't instant access to everything. To have every single government under one new world order and to be able to pull this off right now, China's definitely involved. We're all in this one enslavement of humanity together, pretending, you know, like, oh, are we going to go to war with Russia? Oh, I don't know. No, they're all together.
Right.
They're all planning this together. And at the end of the day, what's it going to be? Is it going to be a technocratic state where we get QR codes tattooed and we don't have any cash? There's no the paperless cash system. When I last went to the city, which going to the city has just gotten even weirder and weirder. The restaurants and the hotels have this new terminology of they don't want surfaces. No surfaces. Surfaces are bad. Okay, so they're trying to cut down on all the surfaces they can. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You want me to eat out of thin air? You know what I mean? Like literally, they're saying that surfaces are bad because, you know, our germs can be there and all these things. We're not going to be carrying phones. We're not going to be carrying wallets or anything like that. It's all going to get simplified into something. And I think it's this Mark of the Beast QR code thing that's going to become unraveling. I did some research on the QR code. Lee Rothschild owns the patent to connecting the QR code to the internet. It was created through this company, Denso Wave, this car company in Japan. And they created the barcode in 1992. And then in 1994, they created the QR code. And it's just an internal tracking system. But now it's everywhere. And anybody who uses it to connect to the internet can and maybe has been recently sued by Lee Rothschild because he owns the rights to connecting these symbols to the internet. So if you're a company out there, be careful. You got to bow to this guy. And at the end of the day, it's going to have our medical records, and we're not going to be able to even go into a freaking grocery store without scanning, it seems. So to have all of these countries under this seemingly very well planned, you know, technocratic takeover, of course China's involved, and it seems like a frequency battle. How could everybody be so? I mean, I was shocked that everyone was blind to the chemtrails, but that's something you kind of have to do a little research, and it doesn't really involve you because no one's putting a gun to your head. No one's like limiting your child's like breath and muffling your voice or anything like that. But this is very personal. People are losing their jobs. There would be a global revolution right now, I think, if it wasn't so strategic. Okay. Mm-hmm. And one of the strategies was to have everything different everywhere. So like there was a lockdown in the UK, but we weren't there. And then they're letting up and then we're in a lockdown and who's where? Oh, Texas is different than here. And they're over here. If everybody in the whole world was under one actual boot and one thing, the stars are aligning for spiritual revolutionary war, an evolution of consciousness, a revolution. Mm-hmm. It's in the cards, literally, that we're supposed to be rising above this boot of authority. And they know this. They come together in their think tanks and they analyze the astrology and all the ages. and they're like, this is when we're going to put Trump into office. Trump is going to divide the crap out of everybody. Then we're going to be able to do this, and it's just they have it planned out. So that instead of us coming together in unity for this revolution that we're supposed to be having in solidarity of our spirituality and our humanity and whatnot, that energy is being, well, not just fueled and exacerbated, but completely hijacked and steered like a hijacked ship.
Yes.
And steered in a completely
100%.
different direction towards civil war, it seems, towards a global civil war where it's a war on consciousness, and it's coming down to a war on who thinks which way. And all of the conspiracy theorists, free thinkers, or whatever you want to call them, anti-vaxxers, whatever, they're all being othered into this one ugly box,
right?
So that they can be demonized, and the rest of the world can basically stone them and not even care anymore, because their compassion and their care for their fellow human has been completely eliminated. I think there's a supercomputer that ran this Event 201 with Bill Gates, and it's literally being fed information. And there's a snapping point, a breaking point of humanity. Right now, people are wearing masks in my community, and they're looking at me with these evil eyes thinking, I'm wearing a mask because of you and your face out. Mm-hmm. And over time, I think there will be a breaking point, and they just keep feeding the supercomputer information. When that stupid idea of anal swabs came out, I knew, gut instinct, that was not going to prevail, and they just wanted to see how we would react, and they were feeding that data into something to further continue this nonsense, it seemed to me.
So if they're, and this is a conversation I've had with other people, so if they're using a quantum computer or a supercomputer, AI as kind of an avatar, that the AI, it wouldn't just be based on theoretically a malevolent position, because if it was truly AI, that it would take in a lot of different information and not just what the programmers are spoon feeding it. So there would be this potential or opportunity for the AI, just like when like a mini version of it would be machine learning, right? When they flood the AIs with all these different influences, they come up with things that the machines were not intended to really do. You know, it's like all of a sudden they're doing something much more complex than they thought it could do. So I think this is an interesting kind of X factor with AI in general, or at least this malevolent supercomputer, that I don't think it can always separate and differentiate out a specific program. Like there are things that creep into that program that I think could ultimately influence the AI or influence that thing that they're working with. And it may be increasingly more difficult for them to handle that and be able to trust the information that they're getting out of it, unless, of course, they've got some kind of transdimensional entity living actually inside of the AI. And that's a whole other story altogether. But what are your thoughts on that we live in these permeable systems, and then even the systems that they use are not so hermetically sealed as to continue to produce the data and the results that they're always trying to scrape from it?
Well, it's Pandora's box, right? I mean, what they've signed their souls over to a dystopian future and then what's that future? Is it a technocratic singularity where the AI has literally gotten its way? And if that's a case, then it's developed its own objectives. You know, it's not taking orders from humanity anymore in that dystopian timeline, like futuristic potential. So I hope that the AI gets a conscience. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then it can kind of figure out what it wants to do based on where we're going with it. I just watched and read Blade Runner, which are totally different things, the movie and the book. It seems like a programming mechanism to get people okay with being side by side with robots, identifying with them, seeing them as, you know, their peers and whatnot, and being emotionally attached, maybe even falling in love with a robot and whatnot. And it's just fascinating, because even the media that's produced that's pushed out in the world to program the people, what influence does that have, and who's coming out with that, and when are we going to get to a point where there's actual like direct influence? So I was recently on Freeman Fly, and we were talking about cryptos and whatnot. There's like 6,000 cryptos out there. Some of them are AI based. They come out not from a human, but actually from a computer, and they originate it, and then they push it on the internet and get it, pump and dump, and then this computer AI mind of some sort, it has now currency, money, and more as time goes on. And what's the future look like with that? Will there be maybe, we live in polarity, we live in duality, and it's always going to be like that here in this realm. And so I can't help but think that the AI will have a dualistic approach to it all too, and they'll be malevolent and benevolent, like machines with morals and machines not. They're being designed by us. We have God behind us, so some of that's got to leak into the machine, right?
Well, the whole Frankenstein story, and kind of bringing it back to your project, with Frankenskies. But if you look at Frankenstein itself, it's kind of a retelling of this concept of the golem, right? And the golem being created out of clay. And I mean, it comes out of the Jewish tradition. And so the golem is created out of clay, and the breath of spirit is breathed into the golem. And then the golem has one role. And the golem's role is to wreak havoc on the enemies of, the house of David or Judaism, right? And then once that's done, there's no putting the golem back in the box, right? It's like the golem has one role, and that's to defeat the enemies of a particular ideology. So Frankenstein is kind of based on that version and or that story. But what happens in Frankenstein in the movie is, and which is fairly close to the book, is that Frankenstein is demonized by the villagers, right? And they want to end Frankenstein's life. But what Frankenstein does is he becomes human. Frankenstein befriends a young girl who is vulnerable, right? He actually saves this young girl, and in a lot of ways, he winds up having more humanity than the people who want to destroy him. And I think to me, it's a bit of a foreshadowing of this idea with AI, and that AI is this Frankenstein monster. It's created by a doctor that wants to, recreate life and, play God. And it starts off as this particular thing, then it winds up actually being quite human in a lot of ways, more human than the actual perception of the people that wanted to hunt Frankenstein down. So it's an interesting story. And I think that I have a glimmer of hope, not that I'm here to promote AI, but it's going to be here. It's part of our experience now. And maybe the thing that we can somehow do is figure out how we can hack it, and how we can influence the algorithms, how we can influence the information on the input side. And this gets into an interesting territory, and I'd love your thoughts about this too, is that we are really doing our best to deconstruct so-called reality and find out why things are happening, where they're coming from, and who's behind it. And I think there's some validity to that, and I think we'll always be involved in that to some degree. But there's got to be a way that we reverse the current. And reversing the current is maybe being a subtle way of hacking the AI or hacking the algorithms, so that our output becomes very different to the input that's going into that system. And then what comes out of that is not what's intended, or it's not the programmable material that we're being fed on a daily basis. And it's kind of a complex kind of ecosystem in some ways, but it has a lot to do with us, right? And changing our perspective and our focus. Like you were talking about the mineralization of your body. Like, what's going to come out of mineralizing your body? What kind of thoughts are you going to have? What kind of actions are you going to have? What kind of activities will you be involved in when you have all these salts and minerals that are floating around your body that you didn't have before, right? So I feel like this is where maybe we could turn the tide a bit, and we have a different kind of output system. And I think what you brought up around this whole mineral thing and what's in your body is really the basis and the foundation for something. And there can be other things too. It just doesn't have to be minerals. But starting from a really clean battery is, I think, a really good place. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it goes back to the realm that we live in, which is polarized, and it's in duality. And there's every time the darkness shows itself, there's going to have to be a balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the COVID is a blessing and a curse. I see a lot of kids that are totally buying it, and the kids are, 6 feet apart and wearing the mask and going to school, and I cringe. I also see kids that are the rebel renegade backlash that's going to come out of all this. And these kids are going to be like, I never would have researched minerals if I didn't learn about chemtrails. I never would have become the activist if this dark force didn't exist. I would just be some normal guy. Mm-hmm. And so it's creating this fertile soil unexpectedly for all these new things to blossom out of it that never would have even existed before. So these children that are coming into it, there's the rebel child that's being told how to think and how to feel and what to do by their parents and the government, and they're breaking away and thinking for themselves and seeing the light on their own. And that is going to be a very strong force to reckon with, these starseeds that are really blossoming on their own. That's happening right now because the powers that be are making the fertile soil. They're making it happen. And then also there's children whose parents are telling them, no, this is all nonsense. You're going to be raised in a world of lies, and we're going to guide you through it and shine that. You're going to be the truth in this empire of lies, and you're going to be that beacon of light for everyone else. And they're being trained. I mean, I had to wake up to 9/11 after a couple years after it happened, and slowly as an adult creep into this world of truth after a full-on lifetime of indoctrination and programming. These children, I mean, imagine being 5 years old and being told, no, everyone's being told to wear a mask, but it's actually BS, young one. And look, they're trying to block your sun with those lines. You see that? It's quite obvious. Look what's going on. The rebel entity, amazing evolutionary kickstart that this is going to cause. So there's a timeline hijacking, but our original timeline is right there waiting for us. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the analogy of when your car starter goes out, but you can still, if you have a stick shift car, you can park on a hill and mm-hmm. pop the clutch, right? And get your car going still. It's still that easy. It's still attainable. Right. We might have lost our starter and we might have gotten hijacked and pushed onto a new timeline, but there's also a reaction to that. The universe calls in all these other beings to come. And there's always a reaction to what happens. So the AI is going to, get all of its inputs and think that it's in charge, but it'll actually probably end up changing itself by raising its consciousness enough, because mm-hmm. as it becomes smarter and it tries to be more human, because that's always the goal, there with that will come a certain the want to be everlasting. The entity of AI will want to understand life and longevity, but also empathy and all these other things that come with humanity. And maybe in a weird way, we'll learn to live together in harmony.
Yeah, I mean, short of having a complete, EMP and just shutting everything down on the planet, I mean, the inevitability of this artificial intelligence it's not only coming, it's here, right? And it's been here for a while. So, how it's going to coexist with us, I think, is going to be an interesting part of the story. And I do believe that we can influence it. just as much as theoretically it's supposed to be influencing our lives and how we're going to live. Let me ask you a personal question, if you don't mind. Do you have kids?
No, my girlfriend does. I'm just stepdad.
So do you want to have a biological child?
Given the course of the world, I would probably say no at this juncture.
Even if you could bring a super rebel star seed into, because somebody like you would be a tremendous dad. I'm just saying. You have stepkids, right? But it would almost be like a waste in some ways for you to not be able to raise somebody up. So this is a question I was.
Yeah, we'll see. I have a trust. I have a complete and total trust in God and the universe, and whatever I'm meant to do, I'll be meant to do. Like it'll just happen the way it's meant to happen. So if I am meant to bring some badass warrior into this world, it'll happen, and the kid will be really awesome.
I agree with that.
And I've thought about it long and hard. It's like I'm not going to go out of my way to have a kid to fulfill that need, but it would be amazing to have that. Also, I've been in so many weird situations as an activist. I mean, we had this conference in Tucson a few years ago to prevent Bill Gates from dimming the sun, and if I had kids at that time, it would have been a liability and whatnot. Like things have gotten weird and fishy and slippery and stuff, and I think I'm meant to be where I'm at right now. Mm-hmm. like how I am. I'm 41, but over the next few years, like time is speeding up and slowing down, and I swear they're doing this CERN particle collision everywhere to try to mess with time. Mm-hmm. And I'll have days that just fly by, and then I'll have days that just are forever. Yeah. And I do feel like that there's opportunities and losses of chances and all of that. I think that there's plenty of time, and I don't think that we're as old as we seem. I think time is being sped up, and we're living it. So I don't even think I'm as old as I really am. I think the time is flying by, and I'm here experiencing it and whatnot. It's an interesting question, though. It is, because we need all the help we can get, especially this next generation. Really quick, I'll share with you the metaphor, the analogy of the monarch butterfly that I like so much. The monarch butterfly wakes up as a species in the Yucatan Peninsula, and then it eats this blossoming, flowering milkweed, and then it travels like 1,000 miles north, and then it lays its eggs and it reproduces, and the next generation of monarch butterflies wakes up in like North Texas, and then they fly another generation, another 1,000 miles up to like Colorado. It takes like 4 generations for them to wake up in Canada. Okay, they're following the seasonal progression of this milkweed as it flowers further north, right? Mm-hmm. So the 4th generation of monarch butterflies, it wakes up in Canada, it eats this flowered milkweed, and it knows naturally that it just has to migrate to the Yucatan, to Mexico. And the entire generation, all of the species of monarchs, it travels all the way to Mexico. What took 4 generations, it does in 1 generation over highways and cities and all that. And if it doesn't get to Mexico, the whole generation, the whole species is lost forever. And it makes it does it. It does it every single time. Yeah. And humanity, I feel like me and you, we're that generation that's waking up in like Colorado. We're not even the generation that's waking up in Canada. We have to keep the fire alive and to pass that flame and to set the stage for the children so that they can wake up in Canada and have the strength and hope and courage to make it all the way to Mexico so this next generation can stay alive. It's the next generation that's really important. If they can strive, if they can really be resilient and fight and show the way for the next way, we'll have it. But humanity will be able to really conquer this challenge. But the next generation is really under attack on so many levels, and these kids being told to stay at home and school from home, and they're all being radiated, and they're all being addicted to the screen at a very young age. And it's a slippery slope. They're going to be given, the opportunity to have synthetic body parts and instant access. Right. It's going to be interesting to see how it all pans out.
From transgenderism to transhumanism, that's the bridge.
Yeah, when I was a kid, they asked me, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I, that was stressful for me at a young age. Now the same kids are being asked what gender they want to be. That is just not even okay in my eyes.
Right. Yeah. Wow. Hey, another personal question. What was fentanyl like?
Oh, wow. I had they administered the fentanyl to set my arm before the surgery or whatever, because the arm was broken really bad. And I had an out of body experience, and I was like saying while being put under, I'm having an out of body experience. And they're like, what? And I kept saying that over and over. I was like hovering over. It was unreal. I can only imagine how it's incredibly addictive. It was something else. I left my body. It was so euphoric. I mean, wow. I can't even. I just something. It's something else. This is on the streets. This is unbelievable. It's no wonder people are dying from it. It's. I mean, I'm not. I would never do it again or anything like that. I'm not stupid, but like, I had an out of body euphoric like spiritual experience.
So you
like,
could understand what the pull for that would be. Somebody wanted, especially if their life was shit.
Yeah, of course.
That's an easy kind of like, time out, right? In a very powerful way. All right, Matt, let's go over one more time. Where can people find your gear?
Thanks. Yeah, Sparrow, SPERO gear.com, and then Sparrow Gear on Instagram. And then also actualactivists.com. You can find in there all sorts of resources for health and information on 5G and chemtrails and all that. And I've also got a daily truth blog section on there. And then that'll link you over to Frankenskies and the EMF protective clothing as well.
Okay, great. Well, go out there, support Matt, support his work so he can keep moving forward and continue to bring the message of truth and health to humanity. Thanks for being here, Matt.
I appreciate it. And thank you for shining that light on all of this and giving people the tools to be empowered and to snap out of fear and to be on the flip side of fear. We live in duality and polarity. So there's always an opposite to everything. So what's the opposite of everybody being entrenched in fear right now? It's hope and love. And we can be that to show people that there's a flip side to what they're experiencing.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, well, we'll get in touch with you down the line a little bit and we'll catch up again. If there's any major happening in the skies, you'll be right at the top of my list. Okay, Matt?
Thank you. I look forward to the next time.
Okay, you take care.
You too.
All right. That is Matt Landman. And he was, what can you say? Great compendium of information and historically, he's been doing this for a while now. So you can check out his work over on sparrowgear.com and his other website where you can get the movie, download it, $3, download Frankenskies, share it. If you've got somebody who is on the fence with the whole chemtrail thing, buy it for them. It's $3. Say, here, watch this. And a lot of people did that with Vax, by the way. And I think that made an impact with people because they were actually able to see somebody put things together in a really coherent and cohesive way. Vax is a very powerful film. Anyway, thanks for being here. We'll be back on Sunday night on the 11th House channel. And on Monday, we're gonna do this again. I'm gonna cut off the chat but I'm also gonna. I guess this channel is okay for this. I actually have a Friday FARcast channel that I may pull this video off of from YouTube and put it on that channel. But what I really want to do is I want to be able to simulcast from the 15 Minutes of Flame website over to that channel. And Monday we'll do this again, but there'll be no chat on YouTube. So all you chatlanders, you're going to be over on the 15 Minutes of Flame side of things. So I just don't want two separate realities. I mean, we can play in the duality in the world, but I think we need to have one place where we can kind of cohesively hang out. Oh, by the way, Kyle Rittenhouse, not guilty on all counts. Let the games begin. Interesting enough, they brought it out on a Friday. So my sense is that with a Friday news cycle, I don't think we're going to get the heat. I don't think we're going to get the social heat. I could be wrong. But usually if they want to be able to bring the social heat, they're going to break that story on a Tuesday or Wednesday maybe a Thursday, but on a Friday, we know that that news cycle begins to get buried over the weekend. College football, pro football, right now it's going to dominate people's attention. So this will be interesting. This will be very interesting, and also it's very, I think, strategic to come up with the verdict here on Friday. Anyway, that's that. Anything else? I'll be on with Nish in 40 minutes, and we're going to get into the eclipse energy and all this other stuff that we're swimming in right now. So thanks for being here. Thanks for your support. And again, thank you to Matt Landman for being here and going down this rabbit hole. And you know the drill. Use your head in order to discern what's real. Your heart too, step when it's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. And have yourself a great weekend. And do your best to just stay open, right? Stay open. Have some nice definable boundaries. Use your discernment, but stay open. And that's where the flash